So I just had an AMA and I had a lot of replies, over 300 or so replies. And I went through and I deduped all of them and I just created kind of like the top questions, like the themes, the common things that people ask me. And I thought I would just like organize it and just answer it here so that you don't have to go through and look at all of the AMA to just like get the nuggets of the entire thing. So yeah, I had a blast doing this. I'll do it again. So let's get right into it. Right. Future suite jobs. This was like a common theme. I got multiple questions about it, but Kartua asked, "Hey John, appreciate you doing this. Where do you see the future of suite? For context, I'm currently a suite 2 at Fang adjacent company. I also got an offer for dental school and I'm strongly thinking of pivoting due to the uncertainty of our future job market." Now, Kartua, you're putting me in a very difficult position because honestly, no one knows the future. Obviously, there's definitely like safety in doing a job like dentistry and, anything physical, at least for a while. But maybe because I'm an optimist, I actually kind of believe in like Jevons paradox, where as all these AI coding agents and coding tools, as they go down in price and the usage of it goes up, I think even more and more code is going to be landed. And then that just means that even more engineers are going to be needed to review the code, land the code, maintain the code. Now, I do know that like junior engineers are having a hard time entering the field. So that problem needs to be solved. But I think like fundamentally, I think we're going to be all right for a while, at least from kind of what I've seen, like the latest models outputs. They're good, but at the same time, it just like kind of sucks at the same time sometimes. It's just like LLMs are like geniuses and they just kind of also fall flat on their face for even the smallest things. But yeah, so I still think this is a great job. I honestly though, if you're just starting out, it's hard for me to recommend 100% because the entry to get into it is pretty hard. But if you're already in it, I think you should just stick around and make sure you're like learning and pushing and like adopting these tools. But yeah, thanks for your question. All right, the next question is around agentic coding workflows. Essentially like what my coding workflow is. So, Mishiteri, given the rate of change in AI, what is the right percent of time spent on workflow, harness, tooling, DevX optimizations? How has it changed since 2022? What is the best way to test new workflows? By just doing real work, or is there a certain flavor of tasks/projects that's best? Okay, that was a very hard sentence to read. So the right amount of time, I think it depends on people, but there is a balancing act, I think, between just like always jumping on new things versus just sticking to what works. So what I like to do is I like to get like a really nice like workflow going. Right now I use Codex and especially Codex app for a lot of my work, but I still use Claude Code mainly for Fable access if I need something like very like in depth to do. But at a high level, I'm kind of sticking with what I know and I really know how to like navigate and I'm essentially a professional at. But every time when there's a new model that releases and some major events like Grokbot is an example. It just came out and it's like kind of changing some of the paradigms. It's like OpenCloud, but it's supposed to be more polished and fully managed. So things like that, I will give it a shot and I'll like test it out because it's a paradigm changing like kind of event. But besides that, I think it really depends on you and your like desire to be on the latest and greatest. But yeah. And then the second one, I think doing just work is okay. It will get you so far. But the thing is, if you just rely on doing work to learn these things, there is a limitation of what you will learn. What I like to do is I just like read the docs. I'll go and just like read all of OpenAI or Claude Code's like entire docs. And then I'll just like try these things that they're saying out, like try all the hotkeys, try all these things. So whenever something new comes out, I have phases of exploration. Like, oh, I think there's a big delta. Like, I'm going to give Cursor a try again. Since I'm going to try Grokbot, I'm going to play around with it. And I already look at it and it looks very similar to Codex app. I actually actively spend time learning the tools deeply because I think that's the best way to take advantage of it. And you'll be surprised how much of your work will change based on some hidden feature that you may never run into if you were just working. All right, question number 3, reviewing AI code. Can you explain in detail your diff view workflows? How do you review code after it's generated? Do you open an IDE or just ask another agent? And this was from Pablo. I actually got a ton of these questions, and if you want kind of like a written down version, I actually made a post about it recently. But to reiterate that a little bit, essentially, code review is the one topic that I keep changing my mind on, and it's like a gradient. It's like a sliding window on what diffs or PRs that I review. Now, I kind of look at code review as like, I imagine like a tree. Like I think of like a tree when I'm looking at the code. So I'll look at the code and I'll quickly see what files are being changed and like what kind of code is being changed. And then because at least I have a pretty good understanding of the code bases I work on, I immediately know whether that code is touching everything. If it's an infra code, if it's touching like hotspots in the code base that I know, then I consider that as like a trunk change, something that is highly interdependent. And if it breaks, it's going to cause a big issue. Then I'll increase my own effort level and also my agent's effort levels on reviewing that diff. But even when I'm reviewing that diff, I really think about the gating and the safety aspects first. And then I'll look at the quality and the cleanness and those kind of things. But it's really around safety. Like I'm highly anchoring on safety when I'm doing code reviews. And then there's the other like types of code, which is like leaf node codes. So something maybe you created a new compose component or React component, you haven't integrated it. Like landing that code only changes the byte size of the code. I guess in JavaScript land, it wouldn't even get sent down. But anyways, that I don't look too carefully because the safety of that code is like very safe. It's like not being used anywhere, right? So I'll definitely just kind of let it go. I'll review it, but I'm not like reviewing it like before. So that's like kind of this high level like philosophical thing. It's really around safety and like how can I get the diffs to be safely reviewed? So all of the old practices still remain of making atomic diffs, like very small diffs, single purpose, so that it's easily revertible and also like easily testable. And then the other big thing is getting the agents to really give proof and confidence levels on their validation. So whether that's screenshots, videos, or runtime data, maybe they do A/B testing on some like, I don't know, some like runtime logs, and then they tell you, oh, the runtime state is like this, so it's actually good. Unit tests, all of these things that's around safety, I overemphasize in my code writing. And I'm optimizing for like landing code at big tech. So it's really about trying to land it safely as possible, because at the end of the day, any code that you write with AI, you still need to back it up. You can't go to like a Sev review and say, hey, the AI wrote it, it's not my fault. At the end of the day, you have to stand by what you put out. So I anchor really heavily on safety and then really tune my effort based on how safe I think that piece of code is. I hope that's helpful. I wrote a little bit more detail on the post, so feel free to read. All right. So the next question is around architecture without experience. This type of question I actually got a few times about people asking about how to learn things when they don't have experience. I think it's actually really cool because it just shows that there's a lot of vibe coders or people who are just interested in this kind of things who never would have really been interested in learning how to code. I think. I don't know Joshua, but I think there's this whole set of subcategory of people that just are getting into coding because AI is making it easier and more accessible. And I think that's really cool. So, hi, John. Thanks for doing this AMA. With agentic coding becoming more common, how do you make sure that AI is making good architectural and coding decisions, especially if I don't have much experience? It's one event, so I'm missing some of your posts, I think. But the high level gist is that, honestly, it's very hard. If you don't know something, you don't know. You could essentially use the AI to do adversarial reviews. So there's a lot of skills around like grilling your architecture and all this kind of stuff. But at a high level, you should always anchor on trying to get as much understanding. If the AI is doing something and telling you some plan, if you don't understand it, I think if the goal is for you to get better, I think you should slow down. You should pause and try to understand what the AI is doing like every word, every term. Like recently I started learning about like model scaling, and I'm not a machine learning engineer or like an AI researcher, but I saw Ryan Peterman's podcast on I forgot his name, but he was from like Google DeepMind, and he recommended this series on JAX ML. And essentially it's like how to think about model scaling. And I've been kind of consuming that material, but it's been very slow. It's like I'll read one paragraph and I don't understand it, and I essentially have Codex or Claude Code, both are fine, like the Chrome extension, and it's looking at my browser, so I'll just say, hey, what is this? What is that? And it literally takes me hours to get through like one page. But after I do it, I have a much deeper understanding than if I just had breezed through it, right? So in my opinion, I think if you don't know good architecture or good coding patterns or things like that, study the fundamentals, like question and ask, and use AI to teach you how to be a better engineer. But yeah, that's what I think. It will slow you down. Like if the goal is to build products and like just release stuff and like have impact in the world, this may not be like the best advice. But if the goal is to learn and get better, then yeah, use AI to learn and get better. All right, question number 5 is update on the coding walkthrough. So let me read Alan's post. Can you make a V2 for this video? And he linked one of my YouTube videos. With the latest Claude Code video and all the things you've learned since the last video, nothing beats a screen share and actual code, which is totally true. So I had this video, it went kind of viral on YouTube. I think it was like sitting at almost 500, like 500,000 views. And it was my first like major breakout video. And this was right around the time, like, I don't know, when Opus was going viral too, like November or like early December or something like that. But it's a really thorough video. And I still think a lot of the things I covered in that video still stands. I think the way I covered it, and it's not just about like showing things about Claude Code, but I cover some bits of agentic engineering and things like that. But I should make another video. The thing is, I did make another version, but I happened to just like use that material to teach with Byte Go. But I should probably make another version, because even since then, since I've been teaching, I've created a whole new stack using Codex app more. And then goals is a thing, graph engineering is a thing, and Grokbot is like another thing that I'm like gotta look into. So there's like new things, but I think agentic engineering and the various pieces of it, like context engineering, compound engineering, harnesses, agentic tooling, agentic validation, all of these kind of core fundamentals of agentic engineering, I think is here to stay. They're evolving within its own thing, like their own lanes, but they're all like core, I think, to agentic engineering. So long answer short, it's in the works. But these kind of videos literally take months of research, of just being in my workflow for day in and day out. So it takes a long time. Yeah, so I'll get to it as soon as I can. All right, the next question is around manual coding. How much code do you write by hand? And the simple answer is none. I don't manually write any code by hand. And, I think this is pretty common. I think the only people who are actually still writing code by hand is people who want to, because they want to feel something different. There's a group of people who genuinely just love to code, like manually. And I was that. I actually don't have a CS degree. I have a non-traditional background, and I found coding as a hobby. And it took me like 5 years of just doing it on the side, building random apps with my friends, until I decided to become an engineer, and then like did a boot camp and all that kind of stuff. So when I stopped coding by hand, there was a period of time where I really mourned it. And I was like, man, like, this feels kind of bad. And during that time, there was a lot of babysitting. Auto mode wasn't even out yet, right? So it was a lot of just like constantly juggling so many different threads, and they would stop very quickly. Like these days is a lot different, right? You're like writing long goals that do bigger tasks, so you have more kind of ease of mind, at least in the brain, like context switching. But yeah, so manual coding, I think, is going away, as sad as that is. But yeah, it's just kind of the cost of this whole like change and revolution. And anyone telling you that, hey, manual coding is not going away is, it's more like they want it not to go away. I think. And maybe for their very specific code is like very specialized and they don't feel like AI can do it. And I think there's some merit to that, right? Like AI is not gonna write perfect code the way you want it exactly, but it will get the job done with the right context and the right validation, in my opinion. And this is kind of where the whole like coding is solved meme comes from. Like people go, oh, you can't even like update the Codex app without having you to like install an update or something. And then they'll put like coding is solved. I think that's just like disingenuous, honestly. Because like with enough context and with enough validation, I think like the coding part is solved. The AI will do the coding for you. But that doesn't mean there's all this like other true engineering work that is just like done. But yeah, that's kind of my high level tech on the manual coding. All right. So the next question theme was around competitive advantage. So Mahesh VV says, if AI makes everyone capable of building, what becomes the real competitive advantage? I think there's a lot to this here. The first thing is around domain knowledge and like domain specialty. I think like social media is like a really hard thing to compete on, is because the true power of social media is really the graph, the graph relationships. That's a moat that's very hard to beat, even if you have AI. And also for all of the major big tech companies, I think data is a big one. Like Tesla, for example, it's hard to beat them on self-driving because they have so many miles. And so the only way like other companies can beat them is through different ways, like adding LiDAR, for example. That's how like Google's getting around it, right? With Waymo. But Waymo also has a lot of miles, right? So I think there's still a ton of ways for you to compete. Now, if this question is really like on individuality, like how do I make like a successful app or whatever? How do I like start a startup? I think this is a question that always comes up, but if you just look at the data of all these companies, there's been more newly minted unicorns in the past like few years because of AI. And I actually think there's a delta in the skill gap of like AI usage. And I noticed that because I teach AI coding. I just like see the knowledge gap between various people. And like most of the students that I've taught like the stuff to, like, or like just even friends, like their mind is blown, right? And the thing is, when I talk to like average non like Silicon Valley like tech bros, people who are not in this little bubble of like always talking about Grok and image generation and LLMs and open source and like model costs and all, like there's normal people are not like that. Most people don't give a shit about any of that. And when I talk to them, most of them are just still on ChatGPT or Gemini, and they don't even know that like Codex exists and Codex can do all these things. And some of these people are like young. They're not like my mom. My mom uses like Gemini and ChatGPT, and she's like, "Oh, it's so great." And but like average people don't need these other things, right? So, but yeah. So in my opinion, there's multiple ways to answer this question. But in terms of like competitive advantage, I think you'll be surprised how few people know these AI coding tools deeply. So if you're learn that, if you're on board with that, then you're going to have an advantage here. All right. The next question is staying sharp with AI. All right. This guy has a bad username, but he had a good question. So how do you stop writing code manually and not lose your coding sharpness? So it's very related to not coding manually question. Personally, for me, I'm constantly learning. Whenever I don't know a piece of architecture within the code base, or if I run into some kind of new patterns that I haven't seen in the code base, while I'm reviewing the diff, I'm always asking questions and digging into it. And for me, I actually spend a ton of time on my own digging into other new technologies. Like I think I mentioned that I'm going through the JAX ML like scaling, model scaling course on my own because I'm just interested. The big advantage for me is I create content. I create content around this topic because it's actually my hobby for some reason. But yeah, I really love learning about all this stuff, making content about this stuff. So for me, it's kind of like a flywheel because, oh, I want to make some content about some AI thing that I'm interested in. If I want to teach, I need to understand this stuff, right? If you want to test your knowledge, you teach. Because once you start trying to teach it and like verbalize what you think you know, then you'll see the gaps in your knowledge. So I like to try to teach. That's kind of the reason why I actually started YouTube 8 years ago, because I just wanted to like talk about this stuff, and doing YouTube is like a really good reason to just really get into it. So I always try to teach what I learn, and because of that, I post and then I get excited about it because people are talking about it and it's fun. And then it actually changes the way I work sometimes. I just see a lot of benefit of continually learning and trying to teach what I learned. And that's how I stay sharp. So I recommend it for you if you're interested in teaching. But if you don't, then you just have to be good with having deep focus time and learning, just constantly learning. All right, next one is around becoming job ready. So Vaishnavi Patil. Hi, John. I'm not in the job market yet. All right, someone young. As someone getting into software/CS, what skills or AI related things would you recommend focusing on now to be truly job ready? Keeping it at a high level, what matters the most versus what's just noise. So at a high level, I think learning one of the like agentic coding tools, whether that's like Codex, Claude, Open Code, I guess Cursor, whatever it is, learn it really well. Like understand how the memory works, understand what's a skill, what's an MCP, what's agents, agent teams, what's the difference between sub agents versus agent teams in Claude's case, what's ultra code in Claude case, when should you use that, how good are the different models, like do you have a good enough sense of using all these different models that if I gave you the output of like something from ChatGPT models versus like Claude, do you think you could like see the difference just by the feel of the model? Can you feel the model? Because you kind of can. If you use these models a lot, you just know that's like from Opus or that's from Soul, you know? You kind of can get a sense of it. So yeah, just get really good at all of these agentic coding tools and learn agentic engineering. There's so much to it, so much to learn. I think maybe not yet, but all of these things that I'm talking about, I think the industry is going to move towards trying to filter out candidates that does know these stuff or does not know it. Like I think the interview process will change at some point where these are going to be tested. So I think that is probably one of the most important. And then the other big thing, in my opinion, is still learning foundational, like fundamentals of like data structures and algorithms, design patterns, you know, clean code, Bob, Uncle Bob, you know, watch his stuff, right? So all of these things, I think the core foundation is really important because agentic coding is essentially an abstraction. It's a layer above, right? And abstractions are inherently leaky. What that means is every now and then, some abstraction layer will like mess up. Like something will not happen, even though it should theoretically happen. And that happens all the time with AI, where you're like, oh, I think it should be working, but the agent is saying this. I don't know if it's actually right or not. And there's all these things. But if you don't have a foundational layer, when things get hard and when things get stuck and the agent has a hard time, you won't be able to steer it. So having a really good foundational like skills in engineering will help you peel the abstraction layers when you need, so you could dig in and really debug and have confidence in your product and your coding. So yeah, those are the two main things I would say. But yeah, I hope you do well when you finish your like classes. All right. Choosing coding agents, question number 10 through 12. So welcome, how do you feel about Codex versus Claude Code? Are you using both in any way or just Claude Code? So I use both Claude Code and Codex app. My class is actually primarily based on Claude Code, but I'm working on a version for Codex, especially Codex app. So this question is actually more than just Claude Code versus Codex in my opinion, because the apps itself, there is a delta between the apps and the CLI versions in itself. And recently I've been converted to essentially not use the CLI. I've almost completely went to the app. If you asked me like 2 months ago, I thought it's like, there's no way I'm giving up the CLI. It's just so powerful. There's so many things that you can do with it. But there's just like a few features on the app side that has convinced me that the long-term priority and all the feature sets are going to go to the app, in my opinion. Because number one, I think all of the major labs are targeting mass market, right? That is their strategy. And that's kind of the ultimate goal. I think Anthropic is like targeting enterprise, but at the end of the day, they want to get like the entire pie of enterprise, right? But for OpenAI, they're definitely looking at mass audience and the enterprise. So they're going to keep pushing the app because it has rich rendering. It's not a 2E. So you can actually do a lot of like very interesting things like a full-fledged app, right? You're not limited by the 2E's like limitation. Yeah, so like rich rendering is like a very good example. But there's like so many little things, right? Like you can control the entire Codex app with your voice using the live like ChatGPT voice. You can queue prompts. I know you could queue prompts in other places, but you could just like drag things around, like queue 10 prompts and then drag them, edit them. There's just like a lot of little things. And over time, I think it's just going to get better and better. And yeah, I think it's going to be hard for just a 2 experience to win out in the end. So that's why I switched. That's one of the main reasons. In terms of like model quality, I think price is becoming a factor for me, even for me. Because Fable's usage and rate limits run up so fast. It's because it's a very expensive model, so they limit it. The thing is, like GPT Soul has been great for me, and because of the price and like rate limits, I actually switched a little bit to using Codex and Codex app and stuff like that. And then I found like the output very comparable to Fable, and I actually think it yaps less. It has like a dog in it, like it just keeps going. It like really goes until it gets the answer. That's how my friend Peter puts it, as a dog in it. When I just tested both of them out, I just prefer the OpenAI models right now. This may change next model release, who knows? But that's like kind of the thing with these models. But I will say it'd be very hard for me to give up the Codex app because I also use it with my phone and I remote control all of my threads and my laptop at home or whatever is just like open. It's just on all the time. And I just control it wherever I am. So those kind of things, all the schedules and things that I've created on it. And like, yeah, it's just hard to give that harness up, I think. But yeah, so that's kind of where I am right now, but it may change. All right, agent permissions. So Daniel asks, curious how you think about permissions in agentic coding. At work, I stick to coding agents in the terminal. Personally, I run multi-agent Hermes and tight roles so one failure doesn't spread. So I think permissions wise, the whole agentic coding is going towards longer runs using goals and less permissions, and then having like agentic safeguards or like an agentic garden that protects your code base and all the work that you're doing. I think this is the long-term right approach, in my opinion. And then the models should just get better and better at doing things that most people don't want, like dropping a DB without, approval or messing up your OS and things like that. So, but yeah, I think less permissions is fine as long as the output is what you want at the quality that you want and you have enough agentic safeguards. All right, the next question is fundamentals and AI. For students building AI systems, how would you balance learning fundamentals with agentic coding and rapid prototyping? For students, I think you should just focus on learning fundamentals. Like, why do you need the prototypes? Like, if you're not going to do anything with the prototypes, what's the purpose of prototyping? The main reason why we prototype for like at work is because we want to get a feel for a product that we want to build so we could show leads or like play with it ourselves. Right. So there's this like reason for the prototyping. But when I'm prototyping, I'm rarely looking at the code. I'm just like getting it. I'm mainly focusing on how, like what the feel is, that's for like client code, like product code. But if it's like infra code, my prototype for infrastructure code is really on exploring different paths. So I'll have multiple agents prototype different ideas I have on how I think the architecture should work. And then I'll get it to a certain point and I will play around with it and feel the API and see kind of the niceties and like things that I might have missed if I, missed an abstraction layer or something, or if I didn't have certain APIs here, or if I exposed this in the wrong place. Like those things, it's hard to imagine just on like a UML diagram, but it's easy to see when you're like trying to add new things to some existing infrastructure, So like depending on what you're doing, prototypes are really good, but they're not really for learning. It's really to answer a specific question about UX or, some feel. You're trying to get a feel for something. But if you're in school, then you should just focus on fundamentals, in my opinion. All right, the next question is around AI engineering specialties. Saravana Kumar asks, AI landscape seems to be very broad these days. From serving models efficiently, training models, RL training, AI infra, security, custom agents, and memory, where should one focus today? I mean, this is a very personal question, I think. Like, I think any one of these are great. You could get a really good job doing any one of these, I think. So it depends, right? It depends on where you are in your journey of like employment. Like for me to like switch into any one of these things would require at least like 2 years of really dedicated effort to be like back to kind of the novice, like kind of like mid-level of probably one of like training models. I'm just learning about it because I'm curious, but if I wanted to really be like an AI researcher that trains models, or even maybe I do kernel engineering where I, optimize kernels for model runs, man, I have to spend like a year to two just to catch up on the latest like frontier, like what the frontier knows already. And then from there to contribute my own thing, my new ideas and write papers is going to be another few years, in my opinion. So like it'll be at least like 4 years before I'm like baseline par. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to be even the world class, right? I feel world class at what I do right now, but it's going to take a long time for me to get there to do this in some other domain, right? But to answer your question about one of these things, honestly, I think you should pick what you think is interesting. Try a little bit of it. Talk to a bunch of people who is doing that. And then, just try like the very basic things. Like the training models example, like if you can get through Jack's ML, like model training, and you're able to train your own like little model using a GPU or even a MacBook with like a high RAM, like you could see how you feel, see how you like that, see how that feels. I think that's probably the best way, because chasing a job just for money has never really worked, in my opinion. You always quit because it's too hard to get through. Any one of these things require a lot of effort. All right, the next question is next AI leap. So what do I think the next AI leap is? So Paul Sufka, MD, doctor, hello. Hi, what are you looking forward to or hoping for in AI in the next 6 to 12 months? What will be the next leap? Honestly, there's hints of it, but I think I really want to do everything mobile. So the voice control is really good with like ChatGPT's voice, but I just need better like visuals, like feedback mobily. And I think glasses may be a good form factor. And Meta display is really great. So I might pick up a pair of those. Shout out to Meta. But yeah, I just want like really good interface just mobily. So I could like code on the go or like juggle my agents on the go. That to me is like the most interesting, because one thing about this profession is that I have to sit and be in front of a computer for a really long time. And if I could figure out a way to not do that, I think it would really change my life. It would really change like the quality of my life. Oh, and another thing that I would be really interested in is video input as like a raw input. So right now, most video inputs, if you add video, what happens behind the scenes is they take the video, they use like FFmpeg or whatever, and then they'll get all the frame data and try to like piece together what the video is through frame data. Now, I use this workflow when I'm debugging animations or trying to build some animations that my designer made or whatever. And it's okay, but it's really slow and it doesn't work all the time. Yeah, it's just not great. So it would be great if we get video multimodal like support, like natively. That would be really interesting. But yeah, so video multimodal input. I think those two are probably like very interesting for me personally. All right, so the next one is around portable agents. Makan asks, as agent coding evolves, do you think the agent will eventually become portable across models and coding harnesses, with things like identity, payment, permissions, and memory following the agent rather than being owned by Claude, Code, Codex, Cursor, and etc.? So this is a really interesting question, and I think this is kind of hinting at some of the world that we'll eventually live in, which is like agents that operate for people will have their own entity. I actually do think that's going to happen. And I think Stripe is seeing that. That's why they purchased like Open Router, I think. I think they're just trying to get ahead of that, and they'll probably create something like that, in my opinion. And it's going to happen very quickly, where agent traffic is going to be more than human traffic in the internet, obviously. So the concept of agent as an entity that operates on your behalf, that has its own credit card information, Gmail, credit score maybe, I don't know. It's like all these kind of things. I think it's gonna be a thing, and I think as personal agents like gain popularity, I don't know if Grokbot or whatever is gonna be a thing, but yeah, as all these things gain popularity, the necessity for the agents to have their own entity, I think is gonna be a thing. I don't know if like the whole memory and all this kind of stuff is going to get ported around with this, but I'm talking more about what it required to be an entity. I think that concept it will be created and ported around. I actually think Stripe is going to be the one that creates it, but we'll see. All right, so the next data is confidential data. Welcome, John. We'd love to hear your take on uploading confidential documents to AI, even when data control is off. You know, I get this question actually quite often, especially people who are in these fields like HIPAA compliant or EU, like people who do a lot of work with the EU. They just have this like higher sensitivity towards data. And my answer to this has always been figure out a way to like host your own like servers and host your own models, whether that is doing a small build out. And the thing is like local models are so good with open rates. If your company has a budget to buy a few like really good like H100s or whatever, and then have that set up and just have one person that's like dedicated to just managing that system. Yeah, just use open source to like use these models, you know, maybe you just use open code and you could get so much done. I think just using these like open tools and open weight models. So that's kind of my answer to that. If not, then you're always going to be just kind of like have to use some enterprise like box version of Anthropic's systems or OpenAI. I think they have an enterprise solution, but I don't know. All right, open models and security. Question number 17. Pragnya and Ramath. Thoughts on open source models being used for cybersecurity warfare when they are as good as closed source ones in a few years? So I think it's already happening. Like this is already happening. I think Hugging Face had to use an open source model because the closed source models were like rejecting the like cybersecurity like prompts because it detected cybersecurity. So they had to use like an open source to get around like that post training kind of like safety concerns. So I think it's already happening the other way, right? This is saying like, what do you think about cybersecurity warfare happening? Honestly, that's a scary question, and I think it's a legitimate thing to be scared about. And a lot of people joke about, you know, Anthropic or OpenAI or any of the AI labs, like saying that, oh, we want to slow down. Like we're very concerned. Like people joke about it because they only see, I don't know. I think like a lot of people just see that and they think, oh, they're just like trying to hype their models up or things like that. But I don't know. I think it is pretty scary. Like cybersecurity itself is pretty scary because these models are pretty powerful and there's just a lot of like 0-day security holes. So yeah, I don't know. Like I try to not to be so pessimistic and that like these companies have so many ulterior motives, but I think they're just calling a spade sometimes that, you know, there is serious cybersecurity like concerns with models and open source models and all this kind of stuff. Because, you know, let's be real, the open source companies, like especially the ones in China, are not going to care that much about like security. You know, I'm not trying to get political here, but yeah, that's just the reality. All right, the next question is getting into Meta, or I guess any big tech. Hi, what advice would you give your past self to make it easier to look for a job at a company like Meta? So I actually made a bunch of videos on this topic, so feel free to look at that on my YouTube channel. But the main advice that I have is there's like a few things. So like I wish I had good grades and went to a good school, then it would have been a lot easier. But if you don't have that, then the other path is first, you actually do need to just know the fundamentals like data structures and algorithms to even pass these interviews. But even to get an interview, you need to have been working for a few years. If you don't have the pedigree of like a really Ivy League school, then you need to figure out a way to get into like I went to Capital One. Like I worked at a bank for a few years, like 4 years or something. And around year 3, that's when Meta and Netflix and all these other companies started knocking on my doors and I got interviews. Like before then, I would send a bunch of like resumes. I never got the interview. But after around year 3, that's when everyone wanted to talk. So I think you just need to have those things. And then once you get the opportunity, you just have to nail the interviews. I think it's actually not as hard to get into a company like Meta or one of the big techs, in my opinion, because it's like interviews in a sense is a solved problem, but it's hard to commit to studying for it enough that you can pass it. I think Neat Code is really great if you want to like really dive in and learn like Leak Code. But yeah, Neat Code is great. If you just know like 80% of Neat Code, then you could get into Fang or Mango, whatever you call it, in my opinion. If like you gotta just get so good at those kind of things where you read a problem, and as you're reading, you already have a sense and feel what kind of data structure or algorithm problem is it. Is it a sliding window problem? Is it a tree problem? Is it a linked list problem? Is it a graph problem? I don't know. There is a subset of these things, and you can start pattern recognizing. So for me personally, I tried twice. The first time I got my ass kicked. I failed every single interviews. I did basically everywhere. And I just like failed. That taught me what I was missing. That taught me the gaps. And then the next time I studied literally for a month and a half, 4 hours a day. I was on pat leave during that time. And then I got 2 offers, like at Meta and Netflix, and I took the Meta offer. That's a whole nother story because it's like, anyways. And then the last thing, I think I mentioned this, I think this is a new thing, but learn AI coding. I think agentic engineering is the future, and a lot of these companies are going to test for it. And then another like side tip that's like not necessary is to build in public. Like try to build and put yourself out there, make connections. Doing social media, like doing like content creation, I meet so many cool people, and it's one of the best ways to network. It just opens doors that you never thought was possible. And then social media is one of the places where it's an even playing field. Like you could be 10 years younger than me or 10 years older than me, doesn't matter. If you just make good content and you put a lot of value, people will notice. And then they'll reach out to you and then do stuff with you, maybe give you a job. I don't know. All right, next question. Getting some career questions now, which is growing to staff. So hi, Premium Goblin. It's weird saying this because this is like a random name I came up with for my experiments that I was running on X and Threads and other social media platforms. But what is necessary to become a senior staff software engineer? And could you give tips on becoming an excellent suite? So like this is, I don't know, there's so much. I actually have a lot of insights into this topic, mainly because to do really well at a company like Meta, you not only need to be technically excellent, because that's just the bar. Like everyone's just very smart. And then they have a very high technical bar. That's just like the minimum. But you also have to have pretty high EQ. Like people will need to like you. People need to like working with you, right? And you need to be pretty easy to work with, but not a pushover at the same time. So there's like all these like various factors. But from going from E3 or L3, like junior level to senior, you just have to do your job really well. E3 is just coding really well, just landing a lot of stuff. E4 is like taking a project like by yourself all the way to the end with minimal like hand holding. E5, that's the baseline, but you're now like mentoring other mid-level engineers, and you're slowly creating some scope for yourself, and you're taking on even more complicated projects. But from senior to staff, it's essentially a different job. Like from a technical perspective, a senior engineer and a staff, I think there is not a huge amount of delta, to be honest. And even for like senior staff, but obviously there is a delta, but like the true delta between like senior roles and like staff plus roles is around behavior. Actually, there's a lot of behavior things that make you really stand out. And it's like, it's a totally different job. Like my bar for staff is you have so much ideas and so many things that you want to do, and you're good at executing on all of those ideas, but you have so much that you have to and want to do that you just need people to help you. And that's inherently scope creation, right? So that's why a lot of tech leads is the archetype for sixes, because they help create scope, and then they essentially have impact that scales beyond just themselves. And 7+ is that, but at org level scale, not just your team. So you're like multiple teams and cross org, and it's really around influence. So it's really hard to get into in just this like small like video, but it's essentially, you got to know that staff plus is like a different job. It's a different role. All right. So we're at question number 20. And this is agents outside of coding. What's been your favorite way to apply agents outside of coding? So I actually use agents for all of my stuff, like whether it's helping out with taxes, the typical ChatGPT use cases. But I also run my entire content pipeline through Codex. Yeah, I think at one point for my personal stuff, I was using Codex more for content pipelines than like coding itself because I didn't have like a side coding project to do. But yeah, that has been my favorite. All right, product decisions and AI. Mahesh, provide insights on product design responsibilities and meta and paradigm shifts towards human AI interactions and collaborations. What work are they doing now and what skills do their roles require? So, not just product design, but product management, data science, data engineer, like all of these, a lot of these roles are kind of blending a little bit. Obviously, people have specialties, but like our designer is amazing. They're basically a designer and an engineer. She essentially codes and makes a bunch of like UI changes. And like she doesn't ask us to, fix this pixel or that pixel. She just like does it. And it's been really nice. It's really great. And they're closer to the code and they gain more empathy to what we do. I have always like gave my own opinions about designs and stuff, but I'm not like doing the designs yet, right? But in terms of like data science, I'm doing my own queries now. I'm doing my own analysis. I mean, I've always done that, but it's a lot easier with AI to run like queries and get like impact sizing and things like that. So the roles are definitely blending. Yeah, it's very interesting. Not just us, but I don't think the entire industry has figured it out yet. That's why everyone's being just labeled as member of technical staff, like the labs. But yeah, it's a very interesting like state we're in right now. All right, lessons from Meta products. Nice to see another new L7 suite on here. What have you found as the most interesting projects of the ones you worked on and why? Interested to hear both from a technical perspective and organizational one. So obviously working on Reels was like a dream come true at the time. I was like a E4 right when I got to join Reels, and essentially I got to like senior during that time, my tenure at Reels, but I was there when we launched it. So I got to join the team that created it. I always get to say that, even though I joined at the very tail end of it. But yeah, that product was really interesting. It was very technical and hard for me because I switched from full stack web to mobile during that time because I really wanted to work on Reels. And it's a really interesting product. And a lot of people don't know that Reels is actually a music-based app and everything's indexed around music. So that's a really interesting project. I also got to work on Meta AI, like the original like Connect launch of Meta AI on Messenger. I know like Meta AI is not like the most widely used right now, but this was during Llama 3 days where it was very popular and like a lot of people were using it. But yeah, I think that was really interesting because none of us, the entire industry hasn't really figured out what AI, like interacting with AI looked like. So all of these new UX patterns and like client code had to be like just kind of imagined, and I really enjoy that like experience. All right, so the last question is growing content reach. Draco asks, hey, yeah, and welcome. What are some of your best tips for content creations in the agentic era? I've recently just started sharing content and so far limited to my blog and LinkedIn. How do you approach the reach of your content? So a few things. I have content pipelines with my agents. And the other big thing is I use Ferryman, which is my friend Kevin's startup. And what I do is I essentially post to one place and it ferries all of my content. And it has been really helpful helping me go viral in like places that I didn't even know I was going viral. But as a content creator, like the best advice I can give to you is don't rely on just one platform and just make sure you post, but make sure you reuse a lot of the content that you have, repurpose them because people hang out in different places. They don't always cross paths. Yeah? Some people only stay on X, some people only stay on Threads, some people only consume on YouTube. So just be everywhere. Every creator is doing this, but they just have a team do it. I'm just by myself, so I leverage Ferryman. So shout outs to my friend Kevin for making that. But yeah, that's basically it. All right, so that's all the questions on the AMA that I thought I kind of like dedupe as much as I can. I'm sure I missed a few, but feel free to add more questions here and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. But yeah, I really love doing AMAs. I feel like it's just like a fun way to interact with the community of like people that have the same hobbies that I do, like same interests. And I could talk about AI and like software and career stuff all day. I don't know why. I'm weird, but this is what I enjoy talking about. And I don't get to do that all the time because my wife doesn't want to talk about that kind of stuff. She just wants to, I don't know, talk about Korean mom dramas. But yeah, thanks for watching this little series of videos or this little video. I hope to make more of these kind of videos. And thanks for supporting me in this journey. All right.